Chills. Number 7. Skeletor. The Hampton Court Palace in London is home to a well-known apparition named Skeletor, a genderless figure whose identity and intentions remain unknown to this day. In 2003, security guards stormed the palace after their fire alarm system showed a major breach near the exhibit hall. Someone had flung open the fire doors, sounding the alarm. The guards searched the vicinity and found no one to be there. A review of the tape showed the doors opening by themselves. Only blackness filled the doorway, nothing else. The next day, the fire alarm went off again. It was at the same time as before and at the exact same location, just outside of the exhibit hall. When the guards got there, however, they were surprised to find everything was in order. The fire doors were securely shut, and a search turned up nothing out of the ordinary. They reviewed the tape again, expecting to find nothing, but this time they were absolutely baffled by what they saw. On the tape, both of the fire doors burst open, and a pale figure wearing floor-length garments steps into view. The figure stands in the doorway for a moment, seemingly scanning the area, and then closes the doors one at a time. It is impossible to determine the figure's gender, but the sleeves and neck of the outfit seem to be frilly, almost like a medieval tunic, and spectators agree that the figure was dressed as if it were straight out of the 16th century. The security guards weren't the only ones who think they have seen Skeletor. On that very same day, a visitor claims to have seen the figure as well. In fact, she was so startled that she wrote of the sighting in the palace's guest book. On the third day, the fire alarm went off one last time. The guards found nothing. Security footage shows the doors opening with no one behind them. The Hampton Court Palace was home to King Henry VIII, a royal figure famous for suspecting his wives of adultery and witchcraft and putting them to death. Could this ghostly sighting be a past wife of Henry's who could have never let go of her earthly ties? Or was it one of the other tens of thousands of people who died under the king's reign? No one knows for sure, and no one has ever seen Skeletor since. Number 6. Scared Shipless. The USS Hornet is an aircraft carrier that was active from World War II all the way to 1970. Although it has since been converted into a floating maritime museum, that's not enough to negate its dark and sinister past. The Hornet saw extraordinary heavy combat in World War II when the Japanese planes strafed them without mercy at the Midway Islands, bombing them with such an intensity that the crew had to load piping hot ammunition with their bare hands just to keep up with the frantic pace. Below deck, the USS Hornet ran on steam that made the control room over 125 degrees at times. More than one crewman died of heat stroke, or even died from fatal burns after a steam pipe would rupture and melt their skin. Conditions were so bad that suicides were not uncommon from the stress alone. All in all, it is estimated that 300 lives were lost aboard this vessel, and it is legendarily haunted as a result. In 2009, a Coast Guard unit was repainting the USS Hornet's interior. When their paint ran low, one of them ran to find a person who was in charge of distributing more. Alone now, he wandered into a side passage until he saw a fellow Coast Guard about 25 feet ahead. He called out to the man, but instead of turning around, the man completely ignored him and turned a corner. When the Coast Guardsman followed, he found the entrance chained off and the room completely empty. This is one of the many stories of the quote-unquote dress white's ghost, a sailor who wears his bright white uniform with a vacant look. Some claim he was the captain, but his real identity and fate have never been discovered. On a different day around the same time as the first sighting, two tourists wandered into a section that was clearly off limits. While walking through the debris in abandoned rooms, they saw a uniformed officer walking towards them. They began to profusely apologize for trespassing, but the officer walked by them without making eye contact, instead turning into another room. When they followed him for directions, the room was empty. Number 5. Owner of a broken heart. Sonny Graham was a Georgia man who desperately needed a new heart. In 1995, he was finally scheduled to get one. The donor man was a 33-year-old man named Terry Cottill, who had shot himself to death. The heart transplant was successful and Graham was a new man, in more ways than one, some people would later add. It all started when something inside of Graham demanded to meet Cheryl Cottill, the widow of the donor who had saved his life. When they first met, there was something about Graham's personality that seemed oddly familiar to Cheryl. For example, one day, Graham suddenly developed a new craving for hot dogs and beer that never went away. Hot dogs and beer just so happened to be Terry Cottill's favorite combination. Although Graham was 65 and she was 38, it was as if the two had known each other forever. Their relationship blossomed, and by 2004 they were married. By that same year, however, the relationship seemed to be over already, and Graham did not take the breakup well. In response to getting a divorce, he shot himself in the head, just like Terry Cottill. Was this just a series of strange coincidences that led to two men with the same heart to kill themselves in the exact same way? Or was it Terry's heart, unable to stand losing the same woman twice, that compelled Graham to pull the trigger on that day? Number 4, the presence. Carissa Glenn, also known as Tish, was only 18 when she learned that a woman had hung herself in the same apartment building that she was moving into. Still, that did not stop the young girl from wanting to move away from her family and become fully independent. Tish had dreams of one day becoming a police officer, and she was already making a decent living as a bartender at the time. This was in the UK, where the legal drinking age is not 21. Upon moving into her new apartment, however, Tish, who her friends and family had described as bubbly and vivacious, appeared to change. Tish began regularly calling her mother to describe a strange quote-unquote presence in her small apartment room, especially at night. She began having vivid dreams about the woman who had killed herself that left her scared and panicking. During the final week before tragedy struck, Tish called her mother no less than 3 separate times to complain of a dreadful feeling that would not go away no matter what she tried to do. Her family pleaded with her to return home, even saying that they would pay all of the costs just so long as she got out of her current living conditions, which were obviously driving her insane. Tish, however, refused to let her parents help. She felt that she could withstand the presence on her own. In the middle of the night, Tish got out of bed and went into her bathroom. She tied a pink scarf around the shower rail and looped it around her neck. Number 3, confession by possession. The brutal death of Teresita Basha rattled 1970s Chicago. The 47-year-old woman was found naked in her apartment, tied to a mattress, stabbed in the chest with a steak knife, which was still sticking out of her. Then whoever did this also set her on fire. Aside from missing jewelry, no motive was found. Teresita had no enemies, but many friends. One of them was a co-worker named Remy Chua. Remy was heartbroken over her friend's death, and one day told Teresita's spirit that she would be okay with her friend visiting and explaining what happened. Shortly thereafter, Remy began seeing a man's face wherever she went. She knew it was Teresita's murderer. The visions became more and more intense as they revealed more facts and information to her until she could finally channel her friend at will. When Remy claimed to be possessed by her friend, her husband and a medical doctor were so convinced that he made her tell the police. She filed a police report explaining that a man named Alan Showery had killed Teresita and stolen jewelry after entering her house to fix a television set. The police were most likely unaware that this lead was the result of a spiritual confession, or else they probably would have thrown it out. Still, when they went to speak with Alan Showery, they saw his wife and cousin both wearing Teresita's jewelry. This was enough to get Alan to confess to the grisly murder sometime later. While there are many mysteries surrounding this case, one thing is for sure: if the paranormal world is real, then Teresita's spirit has been finally laid to rest. Number 2, The Devil Visits Germany. Anneliese Michel was a young German woman who inspired the film The Exorcism of Emily Rose. When Anneliese refused to go near a picture of Jesus, saw demonic faces everywhere, and began to smell like death, the local population was sure that she was possessed. As if that weren't enough, she would regularly rip off her clothing, do hundreds of squats at superhuman speeds, and eat spiders and coal. On one occasion, she crawled under a table and growled for 2 days straight, and on another she bit the head off of a dead bird. Exasperated, her family hired an exorcist to perform an ancient ritual from the year 1614, ancient Roman times. He repeated the rites 67 times over her body, sometimes for up to 4 hours at a time. The sessions were recorded for evidence. Annalise would identify herself as different figures such as Biblical Cain, the evil Roman Emperor Nero, Hitler, and even Lucifer himself. Sometimes the evil figures would even argue with themselves, using her body as a mouthpiece. Unfortunately, the exorcism did not go as planned. Instead of getting the devil out of her body, by 1976, the young girl was dead at the age of 23. She weighed only 67 pounds and had apparently starved to death. Her parents say that she refused to eat in order to atone for the sins of others, but others believe that her body could not survive the hellish possession and perished. Her parents and the priest were all found guilty of negligent manslaughter and spent 6 months in prison. If this infamous case is to be believed, then this is the first time Satan's voice has ever been recorded.
Welches noch?
Das sag ich Ihnen nicht.
Im Namen Jesu.
Nein! Nein!
Im Namen des Vaters und des Sohnes und des
Ja, deshalb noch ohne dich!
Santa Mariana. Ja, das ist Familie.
Ihr könnt's auch nicht machen. Scheiß durch, was die doof schreien. Nein! Sie Drecksau, sie verflucht! Das ist unhörbar und grausam ist. Grausam! Sie Drecksau, sie verfluchte! Der das ganze Deutschland verführt, oder? Ja, der ist ja noch drin.
Im Namen des dreifaltigen Gottes und aller Todesten Jungfrau Maria, sagt die Wahrheit.
Number 1. Death at the Cecil Hotel. What was going through Elisa Lam's mind during her final hours on this earth is anyone's guess, and these days there are a lot of people guessing. She was staying at the Cecil Hotel when, on her 3rd day there, elevator footage caught her engaging in what could be one of the creepiest paranormal encounters ever recorded. Elisa enters the elevator normally at first, only to begin nearly hitting every button on the left side. She quickly glances down the hall both ways as if she was being trailed by something, hugs the corner, and checks again. She steps in and out of the elevator multiple times in a daze as if she is having conversations with people who cannot be seen. While all of this happens, the elevator does not respond to her button presses, and the doors remain wide open. Even when she presses all of the buttons in a frantic hurry, the elevator still will not close. Only when Eliza wanders away do the doors open and close randomly. Eliza was found dead shortly after. Somehow she had gotten into a water tank located on the roof, even though the Cecil Hotel staff says there were no ways for her to get up there. The door to the roof is locked and protected by an alarm, they say. They also say that Eliza was moved to a different room after her roommates observed strange behavior and no longer felt safe around her. What do you think Eliza saw?